One day in the 1980s, on a sunny afternoon in Juhu, a Mercedes slowly rolled into a tiny 200 square feet ice cream shop. The man who stepped out was none other than Amitabh Bachchan himself, the biggest star of India. This wasn't Baskin Robbins, this wasn't Amul, this was a shop with no ads, no marketing budget and no fancy consultants. Just fresh Sitaphal, mango pulp and one man's obsession with flavour. What followed next was the story of one of India's greatest brand stories ever told. This is the story of how the son of a fruit seller with no MBA, no business plan and no investors gave billion-dollar brands like HUL, Amul and Baskin Robbins a run for their money. In the battlefield of the ice cream industry, this man built a cash machine that today generates 300 crore rupees in revenue. This is the story of Naturals ice cream.
Good.
The question is, what was so special about Naturals that it made legends like Amitabh Bachchan stop by? How did Naturals survive a war against Amul, HUL and Baskin Robbins without ads and investment? And what are the business lessons that you can learn from this legendary story? This is a story that dates back to the 1980s Mumbai. The streets are packed, the radios are loud, and if anyone wanted to have a dessert, nobody went to an ice cream parlor. In fact, there was no concept of an ice cream parlor because back then, ice cream wasn't a dessert, it was a dream that only the rich could afford. So if you wanted to have something cold, you either had a syrupy gola or a kulfi wrapped in plastic. But behind the sweetness, there were two deadly secrets. Nobody used gloves. The water of your gola could be either coming from fresh tap water or toilet water. And every time you had a gola, you were gambling with cholera or typhoid. Secondly, the consistency of kulfis was quite questionable. And even if you did find packaged ice cream, surprise, surprise, it wasn't ice cream at all. What you got was vegetable fat and not milk. What you got was artificial color of mango and not real mango. And worst of all, the preservatives were so strong that your taste buds would have trust issues. And surprisingly, in all of Mumbai, a city of millions, there was just one iconic ice cream parlor. This ice cream parlor was Yankee Doodle. And if you didn't live nearby, you had no shot of eating a real ice cream. But in this frozen wasteland of fakery, one boy from a small village in Karnataka saw through the illusion. He wasn't rich, he wasn't a graduate, but he had something so powerful that no other MBA had. And when he tasted the ice cream of the 1980s, he didn't taste mango and milk. He tasted colors that did not come from fruit, textures that did not come from cream, and a flavor that came from a lab and not a farm. So to him, ice cream wasn't a dessert, it was a lie. And this is when he asked himself one question. Why can't ice cream taste like real fruit? And little did the people of Mumbai know that this one question would build a brand that India would remember for a century. This man was Raghunandan Kamath. And the brand that he built was Naturals ice cream.
1984 में शुरू होती है कहानी Naturals ice cream की.
And so did the name of Mr. Raghunandan Kamath, the ice cream man of India.
In a world dominated by global giants like Baskin Robbins, Amul, one quiet, no ads, no MBA brand carved its own flavorful path and won the hearts of millions. Naturals isn't just ice cream, it's nostalgia in a cup.
Naturals ice cream. Taste the original.
So in 1984, with no big factory, no big funds and just 4 employees, Kamath opened a 200 square feet ice cream shop in Juhu. And his value proposition was pretty simple. No preservatives, no artificial colors, just 3 simple ingredients. Fruit, milk and sugar. That's it. Because the one thing that he was great at was picking fruits. Yes, Raghunandan ji was an expert in picking fruits because he used to pick fruits for his father's fruit cart. So he could practically smell a mango and tell you if it was sweet. He could touch a Sitaphal and tell you how its pulp was. But what made his shop different wasn't ingredients, it was courage. Because you know what? He did not start with selling ice creams. He started by selling pav bhaji. Now the question over here is, why would an ice cream seller start selling pav bhajis instead of selling ice creams? Well, that is because Kamath ji wasn't just clever, he intuitively knew what B schools call strategic consumer behavior engineering. So in business theory, this move is called Anchor Innovate Adoption Model. In this model, to change consumer behavior, you lead with a familiar product called the anchor to build trust with the customers. And once the customer feels safe, you introduce the unfamiliar product as a low-stake bonus. For example, when Haldiram entered the Nagpur market, they did not start with snacks. They started with sweets. Why? Because in Maharashtra, people were not habituated to savory snacks, but they were in love with sweets like Kaju Katli. These products were trusted, respected, and anchored in the Maharashtrian culture. And once people trusted Haldiram with the most emotional food moments, they introduced the innovation which was bhujia. And it worked so phenomenally well that it helped Haldiram build a $1 million business empire in Maharashtra. Because now the customer wasn't being asked to trust a new brand. They were trying a new product from a brand that they already loved. So the trust was built by sweets and it made room for experimentation with snacks. So just like Haldiram led with Kaju Katli, Kamath knew that no one would walk into an ice cream parlor right away. So he led with Pav Bhaji because Pav Bhaji in Mumbai was safe, familiar and comforting. And once the customer's appetite was satisfied with a spicy hot Pav Bhaji, he offered them something they had never had before, a Sitaphal ice cream. Not synthetic ice cream, not sweetened ice cream, but an ice cream with real fruit and real cream. So his anchor was Pav Bhaji and his ice cream was the innovation. So no pressure, no pitch. The ice cream was just a sweet cold bonus after a hot spicy meal. And this strategy worked so brilliantly that by the end of the very first weekend, over 1,000 cups of ice cream had flown off the counter. And by the end of the year, people weren't coming for Pav Bhaji, they were coming for Sitaphal, mango and tender coconut ice creams. The flavors that nobody saw coming. And one fine day, Raghunandan ji was following his routine of serving fresh scoops to his customers. This is when a tall, dark and handsome man walked in. But the problem was that while he was walking in, there was so much noise and so much crowd outside that it looked like a riot had broken out. So Raghunandan ji was like, "Kyun itna shor ho raha hai?" And to his surprise, it was none other than Amitabh Bachchan himself. That day, people of Juhu realized that Naturals was a national sensation in the making. And soon enough, stars like Jaya Bachchan, Shabana Azmi and even Raj Kapoor became frequent visitors to Naturals. In fact, the legendary cricketer Vivian Richards loved it so much that he endorsed Naturals on national television for free. Yes, for free. So Kamath retired Pav Bhaji and gave India its first true fruit ice cream parlor called Naturals. No ads, no marketing budget, just real fruit and an insane obsession for authentic ice creams. But this is where the story gets crazy. One fine day, Kamath suddenly saw a massive challenge that could have destroyed his brand altogether. You know what happened? It was the liberalization of the Indian economy in 1991.
The 1991 budget ushered in globalization, privatization, and liberalization.
Government led by P.V. Narasimha Rao and his finance minister Manmohan Singh ushered in major changes to the economy by means of the 1991 economic reforms.
I, as Finance Ministry, have an obligation to see that Indian industries' hands are strengthened to compete effectively against foreign firms in our country.
Our markets were opened to the world, with ease of doing business being made paramount not just for foreign companies but also Indian entrepreneurs.
Until now, Indian businesses were competing with Indian businesses. But now, Indian brands had to compete with the world. While global brands stormed into the Indian market, they had what you would call the perfect recipe for success. They had shiny packaging, massive advertising budgets, and a playbook of distribution which was decades ahead of what India had ever seen. The first player to enter India was Baskin Robbins in 1993.
In 1993, Baskin Robbins became the first international ice cream brand to land in India, bringing with it a taste of the West, fancy branding, and premium pricing.
This summer, Baskin Robbins presents 17 ways to get from this to this. New ice cream flavors, all new fruit cream sundaes.
Now, do you realize how big of a deal this was? People back then, we all loved America so much that we glorified people who just went to America. So when an American brand with a fancy name like Baskin Robbins entered India with 31 flavors, it looked like a giant fancy brand straight out of Beverly Hills. It was crazy. But the invasion wasn't over here. That same year, HUL, which was India's biggest FMCG powerhouse, merged with the legacy ice cream brand Quality to make Quality Walls. So this opponent had the deepest distribution network in the country that Kamath could have never imagined. HUL had so much distribution that they could take Quality Walls to every city, every store and every freezer across India. If this wasn't enough, Amul stepped into the battlefield in 1997, and Amul had the most powerful weapon of all. They had mass market trust and the national pride of being India's white revolution king. And they also had a massive distribution all across India.
One of India's most successful business innovations, Amul, started with a revolution, has made India the largest producer of milk in the world.
So basically, in just a few years, the Indian ice cream market had turned into a battlefield. You had a household name like Amul, a traditional brand like Quality Walls, and an international brand like Baskin Robbins. All of them were battling it out for the exact same market. They had everything, massive amounts of money to scale, marketing acumen to persuade the masses of India, and an incredible distribution network. And in the middle of all of it, Raghunandan Kamatji just had one store, no marketing team, no ad budget, and no franchise playbook. Just a 200 square feet shop and some fresh fruits. That's all. So this must be terrifying, right? Now you tell me guys, if you were in his place, what would you do? And you know what Kamatji did? He did absolutely nothing. Yes, he did absolutely nothing. Why? Was he lazy or was he crazy? Well, as it turns out, Kamatji was a wise man. Kamatji actually knew something that no one else thought of. He knew that he had one big advantage that those big brands did not have. He did not have the curse of scale. Sounds strange, right? How can scale ever be a curse? It is a catalyst to become unbeatable in the market, isn't it? Well, let me explain why. Let's start with international brands like Baskin Robbins. You see, in the 1990s, if I asked your parents to choose between a scoop of Baskin Robbins salted caramel flavor and a Sitaphal ice cream by Naturals, which one do you think they would choose? Obviously Naturals, right? In fact, my father would ask, what the hell is caramel and why are we putting salt in an ice cream? So Kamatji knew that Baskin Robbins wouldn't be a problem. Then came HUL and Amul. Now Kamatji knew that Amul and HUL have to think about shelf life, logistics and cost. Because they were not making 100 tubs of ice cream. They were making millions of tubs a year. They were not serving a local neighborhood. They had to ship their tubs all across the country. And when you operate at that scale, you can't afford to use fresh fruits that go bad in 15 days. And if a giant company used real fruits, they would have to manufacture, package, ship, and ensure that the ice cream was consumed in just 15 days. It was absolutely impossible. On top of that, they also had to take care of the cost of manufacturing. Because if you think about it, these big brands were not selling ice cream to the rich people in Juhu. They were selling to a family in Bihar and on the streets of Haryana. So how would they sell real fruit ice cream at a dirt cheap cost? Turns out they didn't. They chose the mass convenience strategy. So instead of making ice creams, most big brands made something called frozen desserts. So let's understand the difference. And this is where the secret of Naturals lies. You see, in India, for something to be legally called an ice cream, it must contain at least 10% milk fat. So you need real milk and real cream. But frozen desserts are usually made using vegetable oils, emulsifiers, preservatives, and artificial stabilizers. Now, why do big companies do this? Because vegetable fat is cheaper than milk fat, it doesn't spoil quickly and it lasts longer in freezers. So it helps with mass production and national distribution. And hence it's easier to scale and store. But here's what they won't tell you. The moment you swap milk fat with vegetable oil, you change everything about the product experience. The texture of real ice cream like Naturals is dense, rich and velvety. So the scoop feels heavy, it melts slowly in your mouth and you get that creamy texture in your mouth. But frozen desserts are airy, sometimes icy, they melt faster and some even leave slightly greasy or waxy mouthfeel. While milk fat carries flavor in a natural rounded way, it enhances fruitiness and balances the sweetness. Eventually, it coats your tongue very, very beautifully. But vegetable oil often needs artificial flavoring to compensate. So it's the difference between eating a real Alfonso mango and drinking mango flavored fruity. So Kamatji didn't use stabilizers, he didn't care about shelf life beyond 15 days and he did not make anything that wasn't fresh. And here's where we have a very, very important business lesson to learn. Just because your competitors are doing something doesn't mean you have to follow. You don't need to outspend them on ads. You don't need to undercut them on price. You don't even need to be everywhere they are. You just need to be excellent at what you do. In this case, while most brands asked, how do we grow faster? Naturals asked, how do we grow without breaking what makes us special? And this is the paradox that most businesses never solve. How do you expand without diluting? In this case, Naturals did not want to become big. They wanted to be loved. And if growth had to happen, it had to happen on their own terms. And finally, they did expand to 170 stores.
The success spread, the number of stores also did.
We opened our last store, 176 store in Kota. We are natural. When I say natural, it's made with 3 ingredients. That's milk, fruit and sugar.
So the question is, how did they expand without ads and without preservatives? Well, as it turns out, what Naturals did was something very, very special, and you can do it today for your business. So listen to this. Turns out they went all in on a bold and revolutionary supply chain solution called the hub and spoke model. For those who don't know, think of Amul. Every single day, milk from thousands of villages flows into Amul's central processing plants. And this is the hub. Here the milk is rigorously tested, processed and packaged. And then systematically, millions of liters of milk move out to regional distribution centers, which are the spokes. And then these centers act as hub to then ship milk to your house every single day. So this structured, rapid and efficient distribution method is called the hub and spoke model. And 2 very powerful strategies made this possible. Number 1 was a razor-sharp supply chain, and number 2 was a magnetic product strategy. So let's decode their supply chain brilliance first. If you think of Naturals at scale, they aren't delivering ice cream, they're predicting flavor trends like a magician. They know exactly which flavor is flying off the shelf, where it's gaining demand, and where it's losing demand. So if Sitaphal is surging in Pune, Naturals will ramp up instantly. If 30 tubs of chiku are sitting untouched in Hyderabad, they will reduce chiku's supply before the wastage hits. So no guesswork, no overstocking and no lost sales. So how did they do that? Well, it's neither magic nor instinct. It is a powerful tool that you can start using right now for your business. It's called an inventory management system. And if you also want to be a magician in your business for your supply chain, you can do it with an excellent inventory management tool called Odoo. If you feed all your data and supplier orders through Odoo's inventory management tool, just like Naturals, even you can predict which product in which shop is in high demand and which product is about to be dead stock. Odoo uses cutting-edge AI and data management solution to predict demand, shortages and even dead stock. So if you run a boutique in Mumbai with 200 SKUs across kurtis, saris and western wears, without Odoo, you might overstock XL sizes that stopped selling 2 months ago. Your best-selling M-size pastel kurtis might be out of stock and you will have 2.5 lakh rupees sitting in just unsold inventory. Worst of all, you might have your loyal customers walk out empty-handed. But if you use Odoo, your software will tell you that your yellow M-size kurtis got sold out last month with a forecasted demand to hit 250 units this month. Similarly, it will identify that your L-size neon crop tops are dead stock due to no sales in the last 3 weeks. And because of Odoo's prediction power, you will also get alerts to restock pink silk saris just before the wedding season. And the best part is, Odoo gives you free lifetime access to your first app. So if you want to manage your inventory as magically as Naturals, click the link in the description and see how Odoo can scale your dream. If this is clear, now let's talk about the product strategy of Naturals, which was an open secret called flavors. Because Raghunandan ji knew that logistics doesn't create loyalty, flavors do. This is where Naturals did something absolutely brilliant. They built a product strategy that balanced nostalgia and novelty. If you've ever been to Naturals, you would know that Naturals keeps around 16 core flavors all year round. And here's where you will find Kesar Pista, Anjeer, Malai and Chiku. These kind of flavors feel safe, comforting and timeless. And this consistency builds trust in the brand. It makes customers feel like the brand hasn't moved on without them. But if everything stays the same, people will stop paying attention. So Naturals created urgency. So they have Alfonso mango in summer where mangoes come straight from Ratnagiri. Strawberry ice creams in winter with strawberries coming straight from Mahabaleshwar. Thandai during Holi with Gajar Alwa during Diwali. These flavors don't stick around. So if you wanted them, you had to show up before they were gone. This is how Raghunandan ji and his team built a legendary brand to scale across 170 stores and generate 300 crores in revenue. And this iconic story has 3 very important business lessons for all of us. Lesson number 1, you don't need to scale fast, you need to scale right. In this case, Naturals didn't chase every city overnight. They chose quality over quantity and went slow with expansion. Lesson number 2, protect your edge even if it slows you down. In this case, Naturals never compromised freshness for convenience even when global giants enter the game. Lesson number 3, your back end must be as good as your front end. In this case, what looks like flavor on the outside is actually data, logistics, and systems on the inside. And finally, create urgency with intention. So learn to make your product feel limited, seasonal, and exclusive. So much so that when your product is gone, your customers must miss it and talk about it. This was the story of Naturals, and I just hope you learned something valuable from this case study. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.